Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengausen. May 19th, here are the main news stories at this moment. Let's start with this video from Moscow.
За что вы нас бомбите? Мне сегодня как раз таки недалеко от моего района был прилет. За что? За что вы нам так? Что мы вам плохого сделали?
But really, for what? Honestly, I just can't understand it. I watch these videos from Moscow and it's like they're from another galaxy. They've been in a coma for 4 years, woke up and... Why are you bombing us? Well, meanwhile, this citizen and other Muscovites who have started having panic attacks can relax a little. In Russia, they've finally come up with a way to fight Ukrainian drones. Priests of the Russian Orthodox Church in Perm held a religious procession to protect the city against attacks by Ukrainian drones. The Perm diocese stated that they drove around the entire city with the icon of the Mother of God of Perm and held a prayer service. In short, this was their way of trying to protect Perm from drones. During the procession, the priests stopped at key points in the city and prayed. Well, now everything will definitely be protected. Honestly, it's fascinating. Russia just never ceases to amaze. FSB agents in Kazakhs are trying to protect Russian military facilities with prayers. I don't even know who they think they are, battle mages or something. That's what they've imagined themselves to be. They held a religious procession, turned off the internet, now the protection is truly ironclad. That's it, the enemy won't get through. Does anyone know, when Russian priests bless weapons, like missiles or other weapons of mass destruction, what prayer do they say at that moment? And how does that even work? How does that align with church canons? By the way, the proportion of Russians who consider themselves Orthodox has dropped from 78% to 65% over the past 15 years. Well, let me give you a couple more interesting facts about the Russian Orthodox Church. In March 2024, at the World Russian People's Council, Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, called this full-scale war against Ukraine sacred. He called on people to pray for Putin. By the way, he also called for prayers for the Russian army, and in January 2026, he stated that those who disagree with the Kremlin's policies should be considered traitors to the motherland. He also promised forgiveness of sins to those who go to kill Ukrainians. You know, it seems to me that even Russians themselves don't really like this deceitful, two-faced chief priest. Patriarch Kirill, maybe some of you didn't know, his real name is Vladimir Gundyaev. In the 1970s and 80s, he cooperated with the KGB of the USSR, worked in Geneva as a representative of the Moscow Patriarchate, and according to Swiss archives, was listed as an agent of the Soviet Special Services under the codename Mikhailov. Well, my father, for example, he listened to Vysotsky, he listened to Talkov, and I think it was the late 80s, early 90s when Talkov sang the song Globus. There were these lyrics in it, where a priest hides a KGB shoulderboard under his cassock. That's exactly it. Well, now it's probably an FSB shoulderboard. It's a generalized image of those who justify murder while hiding behind the church. I wonder, are these songs banned in Russia now? But the religious procession against drones is just the tip of the iceberg. The Russian Orthodox Church sinks to new lows every day. It turns out that at churches and Sunday schools, the Russian Orthodox Church has started opening military patriotic clubs. Military training courses in the Moscow region, for example, at a church. In Krasnogorsk, they launched free shooting courses for teenagers from the age of 12. The instructors are participants in the war against Ukraine, including convicts pardoned by Putin for going to kill Ukrainians. How do you like that? And under the announcement about the opening of the courses, they also posted information about the possibility of signing a contract with the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. Well, this apparently is what they call traditional values. Meanwhile, a prayer service from the FSB branch doesn't really help much. Drones are once again flying toward Moscow and other cities of the Russian Federation. Well, first of all, today, Ukrainian drones struck Yaroslavl. The Yaroslavl 3 oil pumping station came under attack. This station is an important node in the Transneft system, through which oil is pumped via main pipelines in the central part of Russia. Apparently, one of the battle mages slacked off during the prayer, and that's not all. In Yaroslavl, the Yanos oil refinery also got its own greeting from Ukrainian drones. This is one of the largest oil refineries in Russia with a capacity of about 15 million tons. Tons of oil per year. But that's still not all. Ryazan also got its share. There was a strike in the area of the Krasnoye Znamya plant. This enterprise is part of the Russian military-industrial complex. They produced equipment for air defense systems, including S-300 complexes. Well, and the Krasnoye Znamya plant also cooperates with the space industry and with the Almaz Ante concern. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. It's important and you can do it right now. We're fighting Putin's propaganda here, so let's do it together. So go ahead and subscribe. The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation has announced the start of exercises to prepare for the use of nuclear forces in the event of an aggression threat. Wow, I wonder who is threatening them. More than 64,000 military personnel will take part in the maneuvers, which will be held from today, from May 19th to 21st. They will also work on issues of joint preparation and use of nuclear weapons with Belarus. Two senile old men are already trying every which way to scare the whole world, but in my opinion, each time it works out worse and worse. By the way, it is still unknown what condition the nuclear arsenal of the Russian Federation is in. The only thing is that over the next 3 days, the number of air raid alerts across Ukraine will definitely increase, because the Russians, as part of these exercises, are sending MiG-31K, the carriers of Kinzhal missiles, into the air. That's why air raid alerts are being triggered all over Ukraine. There was already one like that today. Well, Ukraine and Ukrainians are showing the whole world what is possible, aren't they? And you have to fight the enemy, even if they significantly outnumber you in both manpower and equipment. In every episode, we have an important fundraiser for the defense forces of Ukraine. Today, we are continuing to raise funds for drones and charging stations for the 37th Marine Brigade, which is holding the line in the Donetsk direction. The soldiers have recorded a video message for you. Please take a look.
Мене звати тату Аня. Я громадянка Бельгія. Я служу у складу 37-ї бригади морської піхоти. Звертаюся до Борис Озан та його підписників.
Ми є військовослужбовцями 37-ї окремої бригади морської піхоти зенітного ракетно-артилерійського дивізіону. Наразі маємо потребу у зенітних дронах у кількості 100 одиниць. Просимо про допомогу у Бориса Тізенхаузена.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
In the video is Anna. She is Belgian and serves as a UAV operator in the 37th Separate Marine Brigade. She came to Ukraine when the war began. At first, she was a volunteer, and now she serves in the 37th Brigade. Incredibly strong and truly charismatic. Despite the fact that Anna is missing a leg and uses a prosthesis, she shows the whole world how to overcome difficulties. Let's help our Marines. Let's help Anna. The link to donate is in the description of this video. There are Mono, Privat, and PayPal options for those who want to help from abroad. And there's always a QR code in the corner. If you're watching on another channel, it also leads to the donation page. We have just a little bit left to go, so let's push a bit harder and help our brave Marines. During negotiations in China, Xi Jinping told Donald Trump that Putin might regret his invasion of Ukraine. This was reported by the Financial Times, but Financial Times sources note that Xi Jinping's remarks about Putin were harsher than before. One of the publication's interlocutors said that during the Chinese leader's contacts with the previous US President Joseph Biden, Xi Jinping did not make such assessments of Putin and the war. Well, you know, Xi ceremoniously kicked Russia off the list of superpowers a long time ago. Putin has driven the Russian Federation into complete dependence on China. This suits China just fine, but no one is going to talk to Putin as an equal anymore. Nobody likes losers. By the way, Donald Trump doesn't like losers either. And here's the news that makes it clear what data Putin is relying on when he thinks he'll capture Donbas by autumn. This was recently reported by the Wall Street Journal. In his report, Gerasimov took, in quotation marks, the Kharkiv settlement of Borova. The Russian Federation military published a video of the clearing operation in this settlement, but as it turned out, the video was filmed 25 kilometers away from that settlement. On May 17th, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, Belousov, congratulated the 423rd Guards Motor Rifle Regiment on the liberation of the settlement of Borova in the Kharkiv region. A day before that, one of the Z channels published a video of the clearing operation in this settlement and shamed those who did not believe the statements of the Russian Federation General Staff. Later, analysts discovered that the footage shown in the video was filmed 25 kilometers away from the settlement in Kolomichika. And then the Z channel started openly mocking the General Staff. Soon, according to the reports, we'll take Kharkiv and so on and so on. Surprisingly, almost every point from Gerasimov's report does not match the data from domestic and Ukrainian cartographic resources, as another Zed propagandist noted. So what is actually happening? These are the very maps that Putin relies on. I wouldn't be surprised if, on his fancy slides, there's only 1 kilometer left to fully occupy Donbass. And does everyone still remember the situation with Kupiansk? When Putin invited international journalists to Kupiansk, he said, "That's it, we've captured Kupiansk, you can go there and film." In the end, it turned out that the Ukrainian armed forces drove the Russians out of there, took out hundreds of them, everyone who didn't manage to escape. And now, the head of Russia's foreign intelligence service, Naryshkin, seems to have gotten into some really strong soup, chased it with an even stronger kulebyaka, and came out with the claim that Ukraine is apparently preparing strikes against the Russian Federation from Latvian territory. Kiev has convinced Riga to agree to an operation against Russia, according to the Foreign Intelligence Service. According to their information, Ukraine is planning to launch drones from the territory of the Baltic states to attack the Russian Federation. For this purpose, servicemen from the drone forces have already been sent to Latvia. The coordinates of decision-making centers in Latvia are known, and the country's NATO membership will not protect the accomplices of terrorists from just retribution, stated the Foreign Intelligence Service of the Russian Federation. As for Naryshkin, he constantly has some kind of phantasmagorical ideas. Soon he will probably claim that Ukraine will attack from space, and so on. But it's not just Naryshkin. Medvedev also decided to support the topic. Apparently, someone in a fit of joy tossed him a little bottle in his booth in the Kremlin courtyard, and that's when he came out with a post. And I've said more than once that Medvedev's speechwriter is an agent of the State Department or Ukraine, I'm telling you for sure. He constantly sets Medvedev up with his texts. Let me quote Medvedev's post. Do you know how it starts? "The smaller the size, the more piercing the bark," writes Medvedev. I'm not joking. That's how his post begins on his Telegram channel. Recently, the dimwits from the so-called Baltic countries once again distinguished themselves with their yapping, Russophobic barking, Medvedev continued. As is well known, little mutts love to bark loudly at the big ones to boost their own authority. It's understandable. The brain is very small, and cluck, 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 and woof, 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 Medvedev added. In short, the Ethel Hobbit has once again spilled windshield washer fluid all over the place. The weekend is somewhere just around the corner. It's time. Again, about the country 404. In general, everything is as usual. Ukraine is not real. Lenin invented Ukraine, Stalin invented Ukraine, and so on. But since today we're talking about the Russian Orthodox Church, let's really recall, what exactly did Stalin invent? So where did the Russian Orthodox Church come from, and what does Stalin have to do with it? Probably some people think that the Russian Orthodox Church is something ancient, continuous, and sacred. Hundreds of years of tradition, golden domes, incense, eternity. The reality is much more interesting. The modern Russian Orthodox Church is purely a Soviet project. It was literally reassembled in 1943 in the office of a man who had previously executed priests by the thousands. This person's name was Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin. Let's go in order. To understand exactly what Stalin recreated, we need to understand what the church was before him. In 1721, Peter the Great carried out a quiet church revolution. He abolished the Patriarchate and replaced it with the Most Holy Synod. This was a bureaucratic body that was under the control of a secular official, the chief procurator. In fact, the church became one of the state ministries. Priests were required to report to the authorities about state crimes they heard during confession. It was written exactly like that in the instructions. The church prayed for the Tsar. The Tsar kept the church on a tight leash. Everyone was satisfied with this arrangement. But then the Bolsheviks came, and a major purge began. After 1917, the Bolsheviks took the church seriously in hand. The logic was simple. Religion is the opium of the people, so the dealers must be eliminated, while the numbers are simply monstrous. By 1939, out of approximately 60,000 Orthodox churches that existed before the revolution, only about 100 remained. That is, only about 100 churches out of 60,000 were left. Most bishops were shot or perished in the camps. According to various estimates, in just 1937 and 1938, more than 100,000 Orthodox clergymen were executed. At the same time, the Soviet authorities tried to create a sort of pocket proper church, the so-called living church. But it didn't work out. It didn't come together. People did not accept this artificial kind of church. And this is where things get most interesting. A nighttime meeting took place on September 4th, 1943. At 12:45 a.m., 3 Orthodox metropolitans were brought to the Kremlin. Not for arrest, they were being taken for an audience with Stalin, Metropolitan Sergius, Alexei, and Nikolai. All 3 had survived the era of repression in different ways. The meeting lasted about 2 hours. Stalin asked many questions, very specific ones. How many priests were needed, where they should be trained, what was required for their work. In short, 4 days later, on September 8th, a council was convened that elected the Patriarch of all Russia. That was Sergius. Soviet newspapers reported this on all their front pages at the time. The state returned several buildings to the church, opened theological seminaries, and allowed worship services to resume. Why at that particular time? And what happened to Stalin? Did he perhaps become a believer? Did he have a change of heart? No, he simply calculated. There were several reasons. First of all, the war. When it became clear that the USSR would survive, but the country was exhausted, the church provided what no political propaganda could: a meaning to death, comfort in loss, and mobilization through faith. Do you sense the parallels with modern Russia? It's the same thing Putin and Gundyaev are doing now. But there was another important point. In the occupied territories, people were returning to churches en masse, and this needed to be intercepted. In other words, the Germans were opening churches in the occupied territories, trying to buy loyalty that way. And of course, Stalin needed competing Orthodox legitimacy. And then there was foreign policy. Even back then, Stalin was thinking about the post-war order not only for the Soviet Union, but was also eyeing the Balkans, Greece, Serbia, Bulgaria, Orthodox countries. The Moscow Patriarchate could become an instrument of expansion, which is exactly what happened later. Let me show you a photo I took in Montenegro, in Kotor, in 2021. Take a look. There was a ton of this kind of stuff, icons, Putin, and so on. In other words, they're still using the same methods today to push their expansion. And now the final act, the church as a branch of the KGB. After the war, the relationship between the church and the state was finally formalized into a system. A special body was created, the Council for the Affairs of the Russian Orthodox Church, which approved every appointment, monitored sermons, and decided who would be allowed ordination and who would not. The KGB actively recruited members of the clergy. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a documented fact, acknowledged after the collapse of the USSR. Some members of the hierarchy had operational code names, as I already told you about Gundyaev. You know, there was a very interesting figure, Metropolitan Nicodim Rotov, in secular life, one of the most influential church leaders of the 1960s and 1970s. He worked under the code name Sviatoslav. Why did I mention him? Because the church in general received, because a little later there will be a very interesting fact. The church received buildings, seminaries, and so on. In general, the Russian Orthodox Church as it exists today is essentially the heir to the Stalinist contract of 1943. An institutional heir, the same logic applies. The church blesses the authorities protect the church. The patriarch consecrates tanks and soldiers, and the state turns a blind eye to the financial empires of these priests. And Kirill is also a product of the system that Stalin created on that very September night in 1943. And yes, this system works. It works today, but now in the service of another dictator. So when Putin drags his empire into hell right next to him, right beside him, there will be a place for Patriarch Kirill. There definitely will be. By the way, there's a very interesting and mysterious historical moment connected with this Metropolitan Nicodim, the agent under the codename Sviatoslav. He died, this Metropolitan Nicodim, right in the Vatican during a meeting with the new Pope John Paul I. This Metropolitan was only 48 years old. He died after drinking coffee. There is a theory that he accidentally drank coffee that was meant for the new Pope. And then, 23 days later, the pontiff himself died. The only Pope in modern history, perhaps, who seriously set out to clean up the Vatican's financial system. He was on the throne for just a little over 30 days. Both without autopsy, both with expedited embalming, both with a complete lack of official investigation. In short, the rapid embalming of Nicodim and John Paul I made an autopsy absolutely useless. So there are mysteries upon mysteries there. That's how things are. So take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, subscribe to this channel, and don't forget, and I ask you very much, let's help our Marines from the 37th Brigade. Let's help Anna and her comrades. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. Have a peaceful day, everyone, and glory to Ukraine.